worse. Look out! Yuri!
I'm slipping!
Gotcha. Hold on!
Insomniac's flair for beautiful effects and character animation is a match made in heaven for Spider-Man. Sony's E3 conference this year showed one of the most visually striking superhero games to run on PlayStation 4, a technical tour de force as its hero web slings and quips from one explosive set piece to the next. There's a lot to admire in the sheer rendering quality of what we saw, confirmed to be using the same in-house tech as Ratchet and Clank's 2016 reboot. The merit of inheriting that engine is clear, and Spider-Man could end up being the most visually standout superhero title of the generation, at least with strong competition from a DC Universe rival. More on that later. A quick word on what we're seeing first then. We're not far off from its September 7th release, and so Sony's confidently supplied us with pristine high quality 4K source files of that E3 conference showing, albeit with that watermark to the top right. It's a fast paced trailer set around an offshore prison, and similar to a PC graphics benchmark, it throws all manner of effects and villains at the screen over the course of 7 minutes. It's relentless action, overwhelmingly so, but as a closer for Sony's event, hugely impressive. For reference, this is understood to be running on a PlayStation 4 Pro at 30 FPS, where pixel tests show a 2560 by 1440 image. The quality of the upscale from a native 1440p to 4K is excellent though, and very much in line with the quality we got from PS4 Pro in Ratchet and Clank. But could what we're seeing here stack up to the industry's best? There's plenty of room for debate, but for my money, Batman Arkham Knight is the current king of the genre. Back in 2015, developer Rocksteady set a high watermark in open world superhero action titles, beautifully presenting a rain-soaked Gotham using a modified Unreal Engine 3. The small details tallied up to build a great sense of atmosphere, carrying all the grit, smog and ruin you'd expect from the fictional city. It gave you materials across streets tinged with neon reflections and a huge sprawl of skyscrapers to grapple hook around at speed. It may have lacked NPCs, but the villains that did show up in numbers were impressively rendered through performance capture. All combined, Arkham Knight still feels like a grand premiere experience today.
You're coming with me.
Spider-Man ticks many of these same boxes though. Facial animations on Elektra and Vulture, for example, are eye-catching. Uncannily so, pushing more towards the photorealistic end of the spectrum than the style of Ratchet and Clank. Materials reflect every divot and crease on their suits with a bloom that equals the quality of the Unreal-driven Arkham Knight as well. A defining visual feature of the demo is the yellow lightning streaks and friction sparks, and once that heavy rainfall factors in, there's rarely a moment missing particle-based action of some kind. What makes this impressive? Well, all of these effects bed into the environment nicely, and reflections from light are accurate. Every dewy surface produces a different colour as our hero swings through. One phrase that describes the presentation here is filmic. Case in point, following in the footsteps of Ratchet and Clank is a close attention to post-effects. The big success of that 2016 game was it released alongside a CG movie tie-in, where the game tried to simulate the film style in real time. To do this, Insomniac pushed itself to produce some of the best motion blur and depth of field effects I've seen this generation. And of course, it all makes the cut in Spider-Man. All these bright lights in the background are seen through a high-grade bokeh form of depth of field. In fairness, forming part of Arkham Knight's feature set as well. It kicks in mostly during scripted cutscenes, but in both games it adds a lot to the package.
Whoa!
The part which elevates Spider-Man's action above its DC rival is its motion blur though. Edges blend together on moving objects and camera whip pans with no sign of artifacting, giving the presentation a near CG movie look in gameplay. It's a small area of weakness for Arkham Knight, where there's a coarseness to the effect when combined with the heavy film grain, with signs of banding too. Both are 30 FPS games of course, and having high quality motion blur can make a big difference to perception of motion there. But even with that aside, in Spider-Man's case it's a genuine bonus to the visual design that stands out immediately. Above all else, the demo puts a big focus on movement. You get a seamless 360-degree range of motion that lets you acrobatically shift between a prison's tight corners. Parallels with Batman's grapple hooking mechanic are hard to overlook. but it's exceeded in its sheer verticality here. Spider-Man also takes huge advantage of PS4 to flesh out New York with more cars and pedestrians on the streets than we ever see in the abandoned Gotham. There's always a sense of bustle and energy, which of course couldn't be achieved in older last-gen Spider-Man titles, largely owing to hardware limits. A wide field of view also gives our web-slinging hero a surprisingly small on-screen presence here, a design choice that follows Arkham Knight's lead in fact, logically helping to highlight your options in a wider area. Indeed, more revealing of the flow of regular gameplay in Spider-Man is the playable E3 show floor demo. Outside of the conference, attendees of the event could freely zip through New York streets in daylight. It's here that the animation takes point. Mid-air spins look balletic as each motion fluidly blends into the next. It's immensely satisfying to watch the character's limbs flail to the inertia of a swing, only to have the body jolt as the next web line yanks him to the skies again. This sense of aerial freedom can make or break a Spider-Man video game, and judging by the demos we have here, we seem to get it in spades with Insomniac's effort.
Incident is active in touchdown. Over.
This web-slinging dynamic is key to the franchise, and you only have to look back to see how important it is. Times have changed of course, but there are traces of earlier games in this design. Looking back to Spider-Man games on the NES or Mega Drive, the character began life as all superhero games did in that era, as a side-scrolling 2D brawler. The web-slinging dynamic only really took off in the PlayStation 1 game, as developed by Neversoft in 2000. It's here that we began to see something resembling a modern style of Spider-Man, leveraging the technology of its Tony Hawk series to give full 3D movement across New York. Unlike more recent efforts, fog was used back then to work around PlayStation's limited polygon count, and so street level detail is out of view for the opening missions. Even so, this landmark release laid the template for future Spider-Man titles, leading right up to Insomniac's latest game. Okay, one more step into retro territory. One generation later, the movie tie-in for Spider-Man 2 was a surprise success, mainly for expanding on that city traversal mechanic. Being built for the more powerful PS2, GameCube and original Xbox, the team at Treyarch could afford to push the fog further out to reveal a maze of skyscrapers flanked by light traffic. This time you had that freedom to swing around the city at breakneck speeds and land on the ground to fight criminals. Better yet, every line of webbing actually tethered to building sides, and motion followed a logical, satisfying arc that rewarded practice. It's an idea that holds true for the latest game here, but it really puts it into perspective just how far we've come.
Was working for someone. What did you get out of the guard?
Insomniac appears to be taking the best elements of these older greats, only to expand them outwards in all directions. New York is fleshed out with more detail and a far-flung rendering range, and up close, materials and effects don't look to disappoint. Animation quality and the handling of motion are the real attraction though. Blending traversal and combat fluidly is a real challenge, but here it looks to be achieving it in style, where even physics simulation factors into battles.
Well?
Just how the combat ties together in practice is something we'll have to see down the line. There's a lot going on even in small alleyway skirmishes. As far as the handling of city scale goes, there's no telling how the full game will play out. Insomniac replaces the Batmobile for fast web slinging here, and ideally it'll balance the world scale with the hero's position in it just as well as the Arkham series. It's all looking promising though, remarkable given it's the developer's first project using the Marvel character, whereas Rocksteady has had 3 games to iterate and perfect its formula. Taking Batman from the corridors of Arkham Asylum to the big city, this demands more immediate success for the studio. Fortunately, the team's pedigree with Ratchet and Clank seems to be giving Spider-Man a leg up, at least technically. The experience there, animating characters on its new engine, with a strong post-effects pipeline, feeds through clearly to the demo at Sony's conference. Ultimately, there's going to be a lot more to it when the game finally releases, but what we've seen so far paints a confident picture. Whether or not it holds muster next to the overall ambition of Arkham Knight, we'll have to see in September. Despite the many parallels in open world travel and combat, Spider-Man's 2018 revival at least takes its own path in engine work, and the payoff in visual design is clear even now. At the very least, and after decades of seeing the character evolve from console to console, I'm hoping we end up with the definitive video game take on the character. Anyway, that's all from me today. If you did enjoy this analysis and want to see more E3 coverage, do let us know with a like or subscribe. And to get notifications as each video lands, don't forget to ring the bell. For the original 4K source file to this video and many more, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net. And to get in touch directly with me or the team, you can do exactly that on Twitter. But until next time, thanks for watching.
Ah!